Hello there, and welcome to this quiet corner where the impossible becomes possible and time itself bends to questions we're almost afraid to ask. Tonight, we're stepping into something that challenges everything we think we know about the flow of time, about the people walking past us on the street, and about the very fabric of reality itself. What if I told you that among the billions of people living their ordinary lives, going to work, standing in line at coffee shops, sitting next to you on public transport, some of them aren't from here? Not from another country or another continent, but from another time entirely. What if the person who bumped into you yesterday, the stranger who gave you directions last week, or the individual you glimpsed in that old photograph from decades ago were actually visitors from the future, or perhaps refugees from the past, walking among us in plain sight? This isn't science fiction. This isn't speculation pulled from Hollywood movies or late-night conspiracy forums. These are documented cases, recorded testimonies, and photographic evidence that suggests something far stranger than we've been willing to admit. The hidden truth about time travelers among us isn't hiding in government facilities or classified documents. It's hiding in the open, in stories that have been dismissed too quickly, in evidence that's been explained away too easily, and in encounters that people have been too afraid to share. Before we dive into the deep end of this mystery, I want you to know that what we're exploring tonight will challenge your understanding of time, reality, and the nature of existence itself. We'll examine cases where people have claimed to travel through time, providing details so specific and verifiable that dismissing them becomes harder than accepting them. We'll look at photographs that seem to show people from our era appearing in images from decades or even centuries ago. And we'll explore places on Earth where time itself seems to break down, creating windows between past, present, and future. If you've ever felt like you didn't quite belong to your time, if you've experienced moments that felt displaced from reality, or if you've simply wondered whether the flow of time is as fixed as we believe, then you're in the right place. What we're about to uncover will leave you questioning not just the nature of time travel, but the very people around you. Because once you know what to look for, once you understand the patterns and the signs, you start to notice things that have been there all along, waiting for someone curious enough to pay attention. The story begins in the year 2000, when the internet was still young and most people were just learning to navigate this new digital frontier. On an obscure message board, a user appeared with the handle John Titor. He claimed to be a soldier from the year 2036, sent back on a military mission that would change everything we thought we knew about time travel. But John Titor wasn't just another internet hoaxer making wild claims. He provided technical diagrams of his time machine, detailed explanations of how time travel worked, and specific predictions about future events that were so precise they sent shivers through everyone who read them. Titor explained that he'd travelled back to 1975 first, not to our time, to retrieve an IBM 5100 computer that was needed to solve a critical problem in his future timeline. He described time travel not as moving through a single timeline, but as shifting between parallel world lines, each slightly different from the others. According to Titor, the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics was correct, meaning that every decision, every event, created branching realities. This wasn't just theoretical physics to him. This was the foundation of the technology that allowed him to move between times. What made Titor's claims so compelling wasn't just the technical detail he provided, but the consistency of his story and the knowledge he demonstrated about computing systems that few people understood at the time. The IBM 5100 computer he mentioned was indeed capable of reading and editing mainframe computer code, something that wasn't widely known until years after Titor's posts. He explained that this capability was needed in his time to debug legacy systems that had become critical to their society's infrastructure. But Titor's mission wasn't just about retrieving old computer equipment. He brought warnings. He described a future where the United States had been torn apart by a devastating civil war beginning in 2008, followed by a short but catastrophic nuclear World War III in 2015 that would kill 3 billion people. He painted a picture of a world transformed by conflict, where the federal government had collapsed and people lived in smaller, more localized communities. Technology had advanced, but society had fundamentally changed. The photographs Titer shared were grainy and mysterious. They showed what he claimed was his time machine, a device installed in a 1987 Chevrolet Suburban. The machine looked like a collection of electronic components and warning labels, nothing like the sleek time machines of science fiction. But the technical specifications he provided were detailed and consistent. He described how the machine created a localized gravitational field that could bend space-time, allowing movement between world lines. As the years passed and Titer's specific predictions failed to materialize, many dismissed him as an elaborate hoax. Investigations suggested that the John Titer persona might have been created by entertainment lawyer Larry Haber and his brother, possibly as part of a complex scheme to generate interest in a potential book or movie deal. But here's where the story becomes more intriguing than a simple debunking would suggest. Even if John Titer was a fictional creation, the impact he had was real. His detailed posts about time travel sparked genuine scientific discussions about the possibilities and paradoxes of temporal displacement. Researchers began examining his technical claims more seriously, finding that while his specific predictions were wrong, some of his understanding of theoretical physics was surprisingly sophisticated. More importantly, Titer's story established patterns and frameworks that would appear again and again in subsequent time traveler claims. Titer case. The John teaches us something crucial about how to evaluate time travel claims. It's not enough to simply check whether specific predictions come true. Time travel, if it exists, might work exactly as Titer described, with travelers moving between parallel world lines rather than changing their own past. This means that a genuine time traveler's predictions about our future might never come to pass, not because they were lying, but because they came from a different branch of reality entirely. But Titer's story is just the beginning. While investigators were still trying to uncover his identity, the mystery of cases were emerging that seemed to provide different types of evidence for time travel. These weren't online claims or forum posts, but physical evidence captured in photographs, documented by witnesses, and recorded in ways that made dismissal more difficult. In 1941, at the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in Goldbridge, British Columbia, a photographer captured what should have been a routine crowd scene. The black and white photograph shows dozens of people dressed in the typical fashion of the 1940s, gathered to celebrate the bridge reopening. But among them stands one figure who seems completely out of place. He's wearing what appears to be modern sunglasses, a printed t-shirt, and carrying a small portable camera. His entire appearance seems to belong to a different era entirely. When this photograph surfaced on the internet decades later, it quickly became known as the time-traveling hipster and went viral across social media platforms. Here was apparent photographic evidence of someone from our time appearing in a 1941 photograph. The figure's clothing, his casual demeanor, and especially his anachronistic accessories seemed to prove that time travel was not only possible, but had actually occurred. The investigation that followed revealed something fascinating about how we perceive evidence and construct narratives about the impossible. Researchers discovered that the style of sunglasses the man was wearing had actually first appeared in the 1920s, making them available in 1941. What looks like a modern printed t-shirt was actually a sweater with a sewn-on emblem, commonly worn by sports teams of that era. The camera he carried, while smaller than most cameras of the time, was similar to portable models that Kodak had been manufacturing since 1938. But here's the crucial point that the debunking missed. While each individual element of the man's appearance could be explained by items available in 1941, the combination was unusual. His overall style and the way he carried himself did seem remarkably modern compared to everyone else in the photograph. He looked comfortable and confident in a way that suggested familiarity with casual dress and informal photography, attitudes that were less common in 1941. This case became a study in how viral phenomena develop and spread in our connected world. The photograph was presented at the Museums and the Web 2011 conference in Philadelphia as an example of how modern internet culture can transform ordinary historical images into viral conspiracy theories. But even as experts explained away each element of the supposed evidence, the image retained its power to make people wonder. Because sometimes the most compelling evidence isn't about proving something definitively, it's about showing us that reality might be more flexible than we assume. The time-traveling hipster case established another important pattern in evaluating time travel evidence. Individual elements might have conventional explanations, but the overall picture can still feel wrong, still suggest that something unusual is happening. This pattern would appear again and again as more cases emerged, each one adding another layer to the mystery of whether time travelers are walking among us. As word of these cases spread, more people began coming forward with their own experiences and evidence. Some claimed to have encountered time travelers directly. Others reported discovering anachronistic objects or images that suggested temporal displacement. And a few claimed to be time travelers themselves, offering detailed accounts of their journeys through time and their missions in our era. Each new case brought its own challenges and mysteries. How do you verify claims about events that allegedly occurred in the past or will occur in the future? How do you distinguish between genuine temporal anomalies and elaborate hoaxes? And perhaps most importantly, if time travelers are indeed among us, why are they here? What missions or purposes could drive someone to leave their own time and live among strangers in a foreign era? The answers to these questions would lead us into territory that challenges everything we think we know about time, identity, and the nature of human experience itself. Because the evidence suggests that time travel isn't just a theoretical possibility discussed by physicists and science fiction writers. It's a reality that's happening right now, all around us, in ways that are both more subtle and more profound than we ever imagined. The search for time travelers among us takes on a completely different character when we move from internet forums and viral photographs to the streets of Liverpool, England. Here, on a busy shopping thoroughfare called Bold Street, something extraordinary has been happening for decades. Not claims posted online or stories shared in forums, but direct encounters experienced by ordinary people going about their daily lives. Encounters that suggest time itself might be more fragile than we realise. Bold Street runs through the heart of Liverpool's commercial district, lined with shops, cafes, and the constant flow of pedestrians. It's the kind of street where nothing unusual should happen, where the most exciting event might be a sale at one of the department stores. But for more than 25 years, people walking down this ordinary street have reported experiences that defy every assumption about how time works. The incidents don't follow the dramatic patterns you might expect from science fiction. There are no bright flashes of light, no mysterious machines, no obvious portals opening in the air. Instead, people describe a subtle sensation, a moment where something feels different, where the familiar street around them shifts almost imperceptibly into something else entirely. They find themselves not just in a different place, but in a different time. Frank was a police officer from Merseyside, someone trained to observe details and assess situations accurately. In 1996, he was shopping with his wife Carol on a sunny Saturday afternoon. They agreed to meet at Dylan's bookshop on Bold Street while he went to look for a CD at a nearby music shop. It was a routine plan, the kind of arrangement couples make thousands of times without incident. As Frank passed the Lyceum building at the entrance to Bold Street, he felt what he described as a peculiar sensation. The bustling noise of the busy shopping area suddenly went quiet, as if someone had turned down the volume of the world around him. Then a small box van appeared, honking its horn and skidding around him, the driver apparently trying to avoid hitting him. Frank was confused. He hadn't been standing in the road, and the van seemed to come from nowhere. But as he looked around, everything had changed. The street looked different, older somehow. The shops bore names he didn't recognize. Where he expected to see familiar storefronts, he found businesses that seemed to belong to an earlier era. The people around him were dressed differently too, their clothing style suggesting the 1950s rather than the 1990s. Even their behaviour seemed different, more formal, more measured. Frank made his way to where Dylan's bookshop should have been, but instead found a women's clothing store called Cripps. Confused and increasingly unsettled, he entered the shop and asked about the bookstore. The staff looked at him strangely and told him they'd never heard of any Dylans in the area. Growing more disturbed by the moment, Frank left the shop and walked back toward where he'd entered Bold Street. As he passed the Lyceum building again, he felt the same peculiar sensation, and suddenly everything snapped back to normal. The familiar noise of the modern shopping district returned. The shops he recognised were back in their proper places. Dylan's bookshop stood exactly where it should have been, and when he entered, he found his wife Carol waiting for him, wondering where he'd been. Later investigation revealed details that made Frank's experience even more unsettling. Cripps had indeed been a women's clothing store on Bold Street, but it had closed years before 1996. The van he'd seen, with its distinctive design and the company name painted on its side, matched descriptions of delivery vehicles used by local businesses in the 1950s. Every detail of his experience corresponded to how Bold Street had looked and operated decades earlier. Frank's case might have been dismissed as an isolated incident, a moment of confusion or a psychological episode, but it was only the beginning. Over the years that followed, more people came forward with similar experiences on Bold Street, each one adding new details to a pattern that suggested something far more extraordinary than individual delusions. In 2006, a man named Sean was running from a security guard after being caught shoplifting. As he fled down Bold Street, he felt a sudden tightness in his chest, a sensation of pressure that made it difficult to breathe. When he looked around, he found himself in what appeared to be a completely different version of the street. The roadworks that had been underway were gone. The people around him were dressed in styles from the 1960s. Even the cars looked different, classic models that belonged in museums rather than on modern streets. Sean approached a newspaper kiosk and saw copies of the Daily Post with the date clearly printed. Thursday, 18th May 1967. He stood there, a shoplifter from 2006, reading a newspaper from nearly 40 years earlier, surrounded by people who seemed to belong to that earlier time. The experience lasted several minutes before everything shifted back to normal, leaving him standing on the familiar Bold Street of 2006, still being pursued by the same security guard. The security guard in this case provided his own account of the chase, and his version adds another layer of mystery to the story. From his perspective, he had been chasing Sean down Bold Street when the shoplifter simply vanished into thin air. One moment Sean was there, running ahead of him, and the next moment he was gone. The guards searched the area thoroughly, but found no trace of where Sean could have hidden or escaped. It was only when Sean suddenly reappeared in the same spot several minutes later that the chase resumed. These weren't isolated incidents occurring to people who might be predisposed to believe in unusual phenomena. They involved ordinary individuals going about routine activities, people with no particular interest in time travel or paranormal experiences. A university student named Jane was walking down Bold Street in November 2006 to meet a friend at Central Station when her mobile phone call was cut off halfway down the street. As she looked around to see if she'd lost signal, she found herself in what appeared to be an elaborate period drama. The overcast, blustery November day had transformed into a calm, vibrant atmosphere that felt like spring or summer. Large oil lamps lined the street, casting warm light that seemed impossible for the middle of the afternoon. The people around her were dressed in Victorian clothing, moving with the measured pace of an earlier era. The entire scene had the quality of stepping into a living museum, except that it felt completely real and natural. Jane's experience lasted about a minute before everything returned to normal. When she looked at her mobile phone to call her friend back, she found that her friend had indeed tried to call back immediately, but had been unable to connect, as if Jane's phone had been in some kind of dead zone. The technical details of this case are particularly intriguing because they suggest that whatever was happening on Bold Street was affecting not just perception, but actual electronic communication. Local journalists and researchers have documented dozens of similar cases over the years. The experiences share common elements: a sudden change in atmosphere, the appearance of people and objects from earlier decades, the temporary disappearance of modern elements like current shop names and contemporary clothing styles, and then a sudden return to normal. Most experiences seem to transport people to the 1950s or 1960s, though some report glimpses of Victorian-era Liverpool. What makes the Bold Street phenomenon particularly compelling is its consistency and specificity. The historical details people report consistently match what researchers can verify about Liverpool's past. The shop names, the clothing styles, the vehicles, even the layout of the street correspond to documented historical reality. People aren't just imagining generic, old-fashioned scenes. They're experiencing specific moments in Liverpool's actual history. Some researchers have proposed explanations involving the city's underground railway system. Liverpool has an extensive network of underground tunnels and electrical systems, and some theorise that high-voltage rails forming circuits beneath Bold Street might create electromagnetic fields capable of affecting perception or even local space-time. Others point to the area's geological features, suggesting that certain combinations of underground water, mineral deposits, and electromagnetic fields might create conditions that allow glimpses between different temporal states. But these technical explanations, while intriguing, don't fully account for the shared nature of the experiences or the specific historical accuracy of what people report seeing. If the phenomena were simply electromagnetic effects on individual brains, we might expect more random or personalized visions. Instead, people consistently report the same historical periods and often describe identical details about shops, vehicles, and street layouts that they couldn't have known about through normal means. The Bold Street cases suggest that time travel might not always involve deliberate technology or conscious intent. Perhaps there are places where the normal flow of time becomes unstable, creating natural windows between different temporal states. If so, then time travelers among us might not all be visitors with missions from the future. Some might be people who accidentally step through these temporal windows, finding themselves displaced in time and trying to navigate an unfamiliar era. This possibility opens up an entirely different way of thinking about time travel and the people who might be experiencing it. Rather than focusing solely on claims from individuals who say they've traveled intentionally through time, we might need to consider that some time travelers don't even know they're time travelers. They might be people who stepped through a temporal anomaly and found themselves in our time, adapting as best they can to circumstances they don't fully understand. The implications of this are staggering. If natural time slips are occurring in places like Bold Street, they might be happening in other locations around the world as well. Time travelers among us might not be visitors from distant futures carrying out secret missions. They might be refugees from the past or accidental tourists from other eras, people who found themselves displaced through circumstances beyond their control and are now trying to blend in and survive in our time. This would explain why so many alleged time travelers seem to have difficulty providing proof of their origins or demonstrating futuristic technology. If they're accidental travelers rather than intentional ones, they might have arrived with nothing but the clothes on their backs and their memories of a different time. Their challenges wouldn't be about completing missions or maintaining cover stories. They would be about the much more basic problems of finding food, shelter, and ways to earn money in a world where their skills and knowledge might be obsolete or irrelevant. As we dig deeper into these possibilities, we start to encounter cases that push the boundaries of what we're willing to accept even further. Because while accidental time slips might explain some encounters, there are individuals who claim to have traveled through time deliberately, with full awareness of what they were doing and clear memories of the technology that made it possible. These cases force us to confront the possibility that organized time travel programs might actually exist, hidden within government agencies or secret research facilities. Andrew Basiago presents one of the most detailed and persistent accounts of deliberate time travel ever recorded. He's not an internet personality seeking fame or a mysterious figure hiding behind pseudonyms. He's a practicing lawyer in Vancouver, Washington, someone with professional credentials and a reputation to protect. Yet he has spent years publicly claiming that as a child, he participated in classified government experiments involving time travel and teleportation, experiences that began when he was just 6 years old. Basiago's story centers around something called Project Pegasus, which he describes as a joint CIA and DARPA program that ran from 1969 to 1972. According to his account, this wasn't science fiction or theoretical research. It was an active program using technology developed from Nikola Tesla's papers, technology that could create stable portals through time and space. Children were chosen for the program because their developing minds could adapt more easily to the psychological stresses of temporal displacement. The details Basiago provides about the technology are remarkably specific. He describes the primary time travel device as consisting of two grey elliptical structures, about 8 feet tall and separated by roughly 10 feet. Between these structures, a shimmering curtain of what Tesla called radiant energy would form, creating what Basiago terms a chronovisor. This energy field could bend space-time itself, allowing passage between different temporal locations. What makes Basiago's claims particularly intriguing is his description of multiple time travel experiences with consistent details that have remained unchanged over years of public testimony. He claims to have made over 40 time travel journeys during his participation in the program, visiting various points in American history. His most frequently described destination was Ford's Theatre on the night of Abraham Lincoln's assassination, April 14, 1865. Basiago describes attending Lincoln's assassination not once, but multiple times, each visit revealing slightly different details of the same historical event. This aligns with theoretical physics concepts about parallel timelines and the many worlds interpretation that John Titor had discussed decades earlier. According to Basiago, each time travel journey might access a slightly different version of historical events, explaining why his experiences at Ford's Theatre weren't identical on each visit. The technology Basiago describes wasn't limited to simple time travel. He claims the program also developed what he calls chronovision, a method for viewing past and future events without physically travelling to them. This technology allegedly allowed researchers to capture footage of historical moments like the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and even, according to Basiago's claims, the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ. When the chronovision technology was combined with holographic projection, it became possible to physically enter the observed time periods. But Basiago's story extends beyond Earth-based time travel. He claims that in the 1980s the program expanded to include teleportation to Mars, where he served as an Earth ambassador to an established Martian civilization. These journeys allegedly used quantum access technology that could instantly transport people across interplanetary distances. According to Basiago, he made multiple trips to Mars and interacted with both human colonists and indigenous Martian beings. Perhaps the most politically charged aspect of Basiago's claims involves his assertion that he encountered a young Barack Obama during these Mars missions, years before Obama became president. Basiago claims that Obama was part of the Mars program under a different name, and that the future president's space travel experience was later covered up to protect his political career. While these claims cannot be verified and have been denied by Obama's representatives, they demonstrate the far-reaching implications that would exist if any of Basiago's testimony were accurate. What sets Basiago apart from many other time travel claimants is his consistency and his willingness to stake his professional reputation on his claims. He has appeared on numerous radio shows, given lectures, and founded Project Pegasus, an organization dedicated to lobbying the government to release information about time travel technology for public benefit. He presents his experiences not as entertainment or speculation, but as factual testimony about classified programs that he believes the public has a right to know about. The challenge with evaluating Basiago's claims lies in their scope and specificity. Unlike vague predictions about the future or general claims about time travel, Basiago provides detailed technical descriptions, specific dates and locations, and names of other participants. These details make his story either completely fabricated or extraordinarily significant. There's little middle ground for partial truth when claims are this specific and far-reaching. Critics point out that Basiago has provided no physical evidence to support his claims, no documentation from the alleged programs, and no corroboration from other supposed participants. The technology he describes, while drawing on real concepts from Tesla's work, involves capabilities that seem far beyond what would have been possible in the early 1970s. The idea that such advanced technology could remain secret for 50 years, while Basiago speaks openly about it, seems implausible to many observers. Yet Basiago's technical descriptions do align with current theoretical physics research into wormholes, quantum entanglement, and space-time manipulation. His references to Tesla's work on radiant energy and electromagnetic field manipulation correspond to real research that Tesla conducted, research that was classified by the government after Tesla's death. The basic principles Basiago describes aren't scientifically impossible, even if the practical implementation seems far beyond current capabilities. The psychological profile Basiago presents also differs from typical hoaxers or attention seekers. He doesn't claim to have special powers or unique insights beyond his alleged experiences in government programs. He acknowledges the psychological challenges of his experiences, describing post-traumatic stress and difficulty adapting to normal life after his involvement in the programs ended. His demeanor in interviews is calm and detailed, rather than dramatic or sensationalistic. Perhaps most significantly, Basiago's claims about childhood participation in experimental programs align with documented historical cases of unethical government research involving children. Programs like MKUltra did use children in psychological experiments, often without proper consent or regard for long-term consequences. While this doesn't validate Basiago's specific claims about time travel, it does establish that the government has a history of involving children in classified research programs. The broader implications of Basiago's testimony, if accurate, would revolutionize our understanding of both government capabilities and the nature of time itself. It would suggest that practical time travel technology has existed for decades, that historical events might be under ongoing surveillance or manipulation, and that space travel capabilities far exceed public knowledge. These possibilities are so far-reaching that they challenge fundamental assumptions about reality, politics, and human history. Whether Basiago's claims are accurate or not, they represent the most detailed and persistent testimony about organized time travel programs ever recorded. His willingness to speak publicly, his professional credentials, and the consistency of his story over many years make his case impossible to dismiss without serious consideration. If he's telling the truth, then time travelers among us aren't just accidental visitors or individual adventurers. They might be products of systematic programs that have been operating in secret for decades. This possibility opens up entirely new questions about the time travelers we might encounter in our daily lives. Are some of them former participants in programs like Project Pegasus, people who were trained in time travel as children and later assigned missions in various time periods? Are there ongoing recruitment and training programs preparing new generations of temporal agents? And if organized time travel exists, what purposes might it serve beyond scientific research? The answers to these questions might be walking among us right now, former program participants who've been instructed to blend into normal society while maintaining their cover identities. They might be the people who seem slightly out of place in modern settings, who demonstrate unusual knowledge about historical events, or who occasionally slip and reference experiences or technology that don't quite fit their apparent backgrounds. As we continue to examine the evidence for time travelers among us, we're forced to confront possibilities that stretch the boundaries of everything we think we know about reality, government capabilities, and the nature of human experience itself. Because the deeper we dig into these cases, the more we realize that the question isn't just whether time travel is possible. It's whether it's already happening all around us, conducted by people and organizations with purposes we can barely imagine. The implications of organized time travel programs lead us to an even more unsettling possibility. If governments have been experimenting with temporal displacement for decades, then the people we encounter who seem slightly out of place, who know things they shouldn't know, or who demonstrate unusual familiarity with historical events, might not be accidents or coincidences. They might be active participants in ongoing operations we can't see or understand. Consider for a moment the challenges facing any organization attempting to operate time travel programs. How do you train people to blend into different time periods? How do you prepare them for the psychological stress of living in an era that isn't their own? And perhaps most importantly, how do you manage the inevitable cases where operatives become stranded, compromised, or decide to abandon their missions and disappear into the timeline they've been sent to investigate? These operational challenges would create exactly the kind of evidence we've been examining. Time travelers who seem uncomfortable in modern social situations because they're actually from different eras. People who demonstrate anachronistic knowledge or skills because they've been trained to operate in multiple time periods. Individuals who appear in historical photographs because they've been sent to observe or influence past events. The scattered, seemingly random nature of time traveler encounters might not be random at all. It might be the inevitable result of complex temporal operations that occasionally leave traces in our reality. But there's another category of evidence that pushes these possibilities even further. Beyond individual claims and historical anomalies, we have cases that involve physical evidence, technological artifacts, and documented phenomena that suggest time travel might be more widespread and more accessible than even the most advanced government programs would imply. In 2003, a story emerged that captured global attention precisely because it seemed to provide concrete, measurable proof of time travel in action. Andrew Carlson, according to initial reports, was arrested by the Securities and Exchange Commission for insider trading after turning $800 into over $350 million in just 2 weeks through a series of impossibly accurate stock trades. What made this case extraordinary wasn't just the incredible success rate of his investments, but his explanation for how he achieved it. Under interrogation, Carlson allegedly claimed to be a time traveler from the year 2256 who had used his knowledge of future market movements to generate wealth in our time period. He offered to share information about future events, including the location of Osama bin Laden and the cure for AIDS, in exchange for a reduced sentence. More disturbing still, after posting bail, Carlson simply vanished from custody, leaving no trace of where he had gone or how he had disappeared. While this story was later revealed to have originated from a satirical news source, the ease with which it spread and gained credibility reveals something important about our collective readiness to believe in time travel evidence. The story felt plausible because it addressed a logical question about time travel. If you could travel through time, wouldn't financial markets be the obvious place to apply that knowledge? The technical aspects of the story, the specific dollar amounts, and the bureaucratic details of SEC investigations all combined to create a narrative that seemed entirely believable. But even as the Carlson story was being debunked, other cases emerged that were harder to dismiss. The story of Rudolf Fentz, for example, has been circulating in various forms for decades. According to the account, in 1950, a man was struck by a car in New York City while wandering the streets in old-fashioned clothing, appearing confused and disoriented by his surroundings. When police investigated his identity, they found items in his pockets that dated to the 1800s, including business cards, currency, and a letter with his name and address. Further investigation allegedly revealed that Rudolf Fentz had disappeared without a trace in 1876, exactly 74 years before his death in 1950. Missing person reports from the 1870s matched his description perfectly, and witnesses from that era had described seeing him vanish suddenly while walking down the street. The implication was clear. Fentz had somehow been displaced in time, spending decades in temporal limbo before emerging in 1950, only to be killed almost immediately by technology he couldn't understand or navigate. While many researchers consider the Fentz case to be an urban legend rather than documented fact, it established a template that would appear repeatedly in subsequent time travel accounts. The pattern involves someone from the past appearing suddenly in the present, carrying period-appropriate items but lacking any understanding of modern technology or social conventions. They're typically discovered when they attempt to use outdated currency, ask for directions to places that no longer exist, or behave in ways that attract attention from law enforcement. This pattern suggests a specific type of time travel experience, accidental displacement from past to present, rather than the deliberate, mission-oriented travel described in cases like Basiago's Project Pegasus. These individuals aren't trained temporal agents carrying out assignments. They're refugees from earlier eras who have somehow been pulled forward in time, often with no understanding of what has happened to them or how to adapt to their new circumstances. The psychological profile of these displaced individuals would be distinctive and recognizable if you knew what to look for. They would demonstrate detailed knowledge of historical periods that goes far beyond what could be learned from books or movies. They would be confused by modern technology, but might show unusual aptitude for mechanical devices or crafts that were common in their original time period. Their speech patterns, social expectations, and cultural assumptions would reflect earlier eras, creating a subtle but persistent sense that something about them doesn't quite fit contemporary society. More recently, claims have emerged from individuals who present themselves as deliberate time travelers from the near future, offering predictions about coming events and technologies. In 2017, a man calling himself Noah claimed to be from 2030 and submitted to a lie detector test administered by a paranormal research organization. The test results suggested he was telling the truth about his claims, though lie detector technology has well-known limitations and can be influenced by the subject's genuine belief in their statements, regardless of their objective accuracy. Noah's predictions about the future were notably vague and safe, describing advances in artificial intelligence, manned missions to Mars, and potential cures for cancer, all developments that are already being actively pursued by contemporary researchers. His physical evidence consisted mainly of blurry photographs and documents that could easily have been fabricated. Yet what made his case intriguing was his apparent emotional distress when discussing his displacement from his original timeline and his detailed descriptions of the psychological challenges involved in temporal travel. A man named Edward later emerged with similar claims, asserting that he had travelled to the year 5000 and returned with photographic evidence of humanity's far future. His proof consisted of images that showed advanced architectural structures, and what he claimed were evolved human beings, though skeptics noted that the photographs could easily have been digital manipulations or scenes from science fiction productions. What's notable about these recent cases is how they adapt to contemporary technology and media expectations. Where earlier time travel claimants might have offered written testimonies or simple photographs, modern alleged time travelers provide video evidence, submit to polygraph examinations, and engage with social media audiences. They understand that contemporary audiences expect different types of proof than previous generations, and they adjust their presentations accordingly. Yet this adaptation to modern media expectations doesn't necessarily invalidate their claims. If genuine time travelers were operating in our era, they would need to understand contemporary communication methods and evidence standards in order to be taken seriously. The fact that modern time travel claimants use modern presentation techniques might indicate sophistication rather than deception. The challenge with evaluating any of these cases individually is that each one can be explained through conventional means. Hoaxes, psychological disorders, attention-seeking behavior, and simple mistakes can account for most individual claims. But when we examine the cases collectively, patterns emerge that are harder to dismiss through conventional explanations alone. The consistency of certain details across independent accounts, the specific historical knowledge demonstrated by alleged time travelers from the past, the technical sophistication shown by some claimants, and the persistent nature of these reports across different cultures and time periods all suggest that something more complex might be occurring than simple fraud or delusion. Perhaps most significantly, we're now seeing evidence that suggests time travel might not be limited to human technology or consciousness. Researchers examining quantum mechanics and general relativity have discovered that time manipulation might be possible at microscopic scales, and that the universe itself might contain natural phenomena that could facilitate temporal displacement. Recent experiments have shown that quantum systems can be made to evolve backward in time under certain conditions. Physicists have created laboratory conditions where cause and effect relationships can be manipulated, where information can travel backward through time, and where the normal flow of temporal sequence breaks down. While these effects are currently limited to subatomic particles and extremely brief time intervals, they demonstrate that time travel isn't just theoretically possible, but is actually occurring in controlled laboratory settings. The implications of this research extend far beyond academic physics. If time manipulation is possible at quantum scales, then it might also be possible to scale these effects up to macroscopic levels given sufficient energy and technological sophistication. The gap between laboratory quantum time manipulation and human-scale time travel might be smaller than we previously imagined. This scientific context provides a foundation for taking time travel claims more seriously than we might otherwise. If time travel is not just possible, but actively demonstrable in laboratory settings, then reports of human-scale temporal displacement become less extraordinary and more plausible. The question shifts from whether time travel could theoretically occur to whether anyone has developed the technology to make it practically achievable. But even if we accept that time travel technology might exist, we still face the fundamental challenge of identification. How do you recognize a time traveler who's trying to blend in? What signs would give them away? And once you know what to look for, how do you approach someone who might be operating undercover identities and missions you can't begin to understand? The answers to these questions might be more accessible than we realize. Because if time travelers are indeed walking among us, they would face practical challenges that would create observable patterns. They would need to acquire identification documents, find employment, establish social connections, and navigate bureaucratic systems that didn't exist in their original time periods. These necessities would force them into contact with institutions and individuals who might notice their unusual circumstances. More importantly, they would carry with them knowledge, skills, and perspectives that reflect their true origins. A time traveller from the past might demonstrate craftsmanship techniques that are no longer taught, speak with accent patterns that have disappeared from modern usage, or show familiarity with historical events that goes beyond what could be learned from books. A time traveller from the future might occasionally reference technologies that don't yet exist, demonstrate unusual intuition about coming social or political changes, or possess skills that seem ahead of their apparent educational background. These subtle indicators wouldn't prove that someone is a time traveller, but they might identify individuals worth observing more carefully. And as we develop better methods for recognising these patterns, we might discover that time travellers aren't as rare or as well hidden as we have assumed. They might be people we encounter regularly, individuals who have learned to blend in successfully, but who still carry traces of their true origins for those who know how to recognise them. The search for time travellers among us isn't just about satisfying curiosity or proving exotic theories. It's about understanding the true nature of time itself and humanity's place within the temporal landscape of reality. Because if time travel is real, if people are moving between different eras for purposes we don't understand, then everything we think we know about history, causality, and THED to be reconsidered. Progression of human civilization might be living in a timeline that has been observed, influenced, or even actively managed by people from other eras. Our present moment might not be the natural result of historical progression, but rather the outcome of temporal interventions we're not aware of. The future we're heading toward might already be known to individuals who have experienced it directly and are now working to influence its development. These possibilities transform the question of time travellers among us from an interesting mystery into something far more significant. It becomes a question about the nature of free will, the authenticity of historical events, and the degree to which our lives might be shaped by forces operating outside our normal perception of time and causality. As we continue to examine the evidence and explore these possibilities, we're not just searching for proof of time travel technology. We're searching for a deeper understanding of reality itself and our place within a universe that might be far stranger and more interconnected than we've ever imagined. The evidence we've been examining points toward a disturbing conclusion. Time travelers aren't just theoretical possibilities or isolated individuals conducting secret experiments. They might be part of something much larger, something that operates on a scale we're only beginning to comprehend. Because when you start connecting the dots between government programs, natural temporal anomalies, and the persistent reports of displaced individuals, a picture emerges of a reality where time travel isn't the exception, but a hidden aspect of how our world actually functions. Consider what we know about how large organizations operate when they want to remain hidden. They don't put all their activities in one location or rely on a single method of operation. They distribute their efforts across multiple sites, use various cover stories, and employ people who might not even understand the full scope of what they're participating in. If time travel operations exist on an organizational level, they would follow these same principles of operational security and distributed activity. This would explain why time traveler encounters seem so scattered and random. We see individuals in Liverpool experiencing temporal slips that transport them to the 1950s. We have people like Andrew Basiago claiming childhood participation in government programs. We find historical photographs that seem to show people from our era. We hear stories of financial traders with impossible knowledge of market movements. Rather than being unrelated incidents, these might all be pieces of a much larger operation that we're only glimpsing in fragments. The implications of this possibility extend into every aspect of how we understand human society and historical development. If time travel operations have been active for decades or even centuries, then the people making crucial decisions in government, business, science, and culture might not all be from our time period. Some of them might be temporal agents placed in positions of influence to guide historical development in specific directions. This isn't necessarily sinister. Temporal agents might be working to prevent catastrophic events, to ensure that beneficial technologies are developed at the right pace, or to maintain stability in timelines that could otherwise spiral into chaos. But it could also mean that many of the events we consider natural historical progression are actually the result of careful manipulation by people who have seen the consequences of different choices and are working to optimize outcomes. The technology that would make this possible isn't as far-fetched as it might initially seem. Recent developments in quantum computing and artificial intelligence have shown that complex systems can be modeled and predicted with increasing accuracy. If you combine advanced predictive capabilities with actual time travel technology, you could create systems that map out the consequences of different historical interventions and optimize for desired outcomes across multiple timelines. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this possibility is how it would affect the people caught in the middle of these operations. Not the trained agents participants, but the ordinary or willing individuals who accidentally encounter temporal phenomena or who get recruited into programs they don't fully understand. These people would face challenges that most of us can barely imagine. Think about what it would be like to discover that your entire life has been shaped by temporal interventions, that the job you found, the person you married, the city you moved to were all influenced by people from other time periods, working to achieve goals you're not aware of. Or imagine learning that you yourself are a time traveler who has been living under false memories, programmed to believe you belong in this era when you actually originated somewhere else entirely. These scenarios sound like science fiction, but they align with documented cases of memory manipulation and identity reconstruction that have occurred in confirmed government programs. If organizations have the capability to alter memories and create false identities, and if they also have access to time travel technology, then combining these capabilities would create possibilities for reality manipulation that are almost impossible to detect or verify. So we find ourselves at the end of this journey, but not really at an ending. Because the truth about time travelers among us isn't something that concludes neatly or resolves with certainty. It's something that continues quietly in the spaces between what we can prove and what we can sense, in the glances from strangers who seem to carry stories from different eras, in the moments when time itself feels less solid than we've been taught to believe. Whether they're accidental refugees from temporal anomalies, trained agents from classified programs, or visitors with missions we can't comprehend, the evidence suggests they're here, walking among us, adapting, observing, perhaps even guiding the course of events in ways we're not meant to notice. And maybe that's enough to know that in a universe vast and strange enough to permit consciousness to emerge from matter, time travel isn't just possible, it's probable. The question isn't whether it's happening. The question is whether you're ready to start paying attention to what's been there all along. Attention to what's been there all along.